So what makes me optimistic is the awakening of my heart and the four chambers representing my state of mind. The chamber of love, the chamber of light, the chamber of laughter, and the chamber of connecting.
There is always more to discover and experience.
Victor Perton here, and it's a welcome to the Optimist Heart at the Centre for Optimism. And as always, a delight. Caroline Ward, my fabulous creative friend, the person who sends me a meditation every morning, conceived the Optimist Heart. And we've now had more than a dozen episodes, and each one seems to inspire me more, and each one gives me materials for more speeches. Caroline, it's a beautiful day, and it's wonderful to see that smile and that charisma of yours again today.
Well, thank you, Victor. And yes, it is a beautiful day. I'm south of Sydney, and it's a glorious day here. And it's great to be here. And you're looking all kind of spruced up. You've got a bit of a new look apart from the jacket.
Well, a haircut, my first haircut, I think, in 4 months. It was like a sheep in the hairdresser's shop, the barber's shop. It was, the guy before me was a little bit older than me, and there were piles of hair, and then I added to those piles of hair. But what was funny was I had been reading and talking about Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking, and he said, "Oh God, I'm a positive thinker." And I said, "Oh, did you ever read Norman Vincent Peale?" He said, "No, I never heard of him, but I'm a positive thinker." And Martin Gillespie, our dear friend, we're not going to put subtitles under your presentation today. We just love the sound of Scottish optimism and humour, and you've even worn a kilt today.
Yes, and actually before I answer your infamous question that you ask every person, what makes you optimistic? Let me demystify the international question of what is worn under a kilt. Let me assure you, nothing is worn under the kilt. It is all in fine working order.
So the sustainable economy.
Correct.
Well, look, as everyone knows, at the beginning of these sessions, I always ask, what makes you optimistic? So each of you who are online, whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook, love you just to throw something in. Many of you have shared them before, and this week, of course, Caroline, we got the results of the Better Normal survey. And literally I now have 1,500 people sharing how they've come out of COVID better. So it'd be lovely to do that. And you've had lots of practice, Caroline. So today I'm going to ask you the normal question, the basic question. What makes you optimistic?
That there is always more to discover and experience. And it depends on what you go looking for.
Oh, that is so rich. And as you know, John Hagel, when he joined us, he talks about the passion of the explorer.
Yes.
Always learning something new. And Martin, what makes you optimistic?
So what makes me optimistic is the awakening of my heart and the four chambers representing my state of mind. The chamber of love, the chamber of light, the chamber of laughter, and the chamber of connecting.
Oh, gosh, I'm inspired. Now, this session today, some of you will have received Caroline's email this week. It was so evocative. I have shared it all over the place. So today is a day of passion, because Caroline, for 40 years, probably since she was about 5, did I get my decades wrong, but has worked with women on helping them to build their sustainability, their emotional strength, their courage. But she's noticed that in the male world, you know, there's a crisis, and it is her great passion So Caroline, I was inspired by your introduction to today, even before you've spoken. Can I throw to you to introduce the topic and obviously to lead the conversation with Martin and our friends who are online today too?
Sure. Thank you, Victor. Thank you. And yes, when I started to write the intro for today, because, well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Martin, for agreeing to sit with us this morning on this side of the screen rather than in the audience, because you're normally part of the community. So it's great to have you here. But I think that for me, we're coming in this week to International Day of Tolerance and International Men's Day. And I think it's an interesting time. I was saying I've been doing a couple of talks about leading into the International Month, if you like, of tolerance. And I really refuse to do it on tolerance because I think tolerance is an outdated word. Even if you unpack it, we need to be talking about connection, because tolerance has implied that we have to put up with the other who's clearly wrong or not correct or right. So, you know, it's for me a time where we have to let go of looking at the things that divide us. And fundamentally, the number one thing where it begins is our body. Whether we start, all of the other things get laid on top of that, whether it's religion or race or nationality or sexual orientation. But the number one divide is our gender, male, female. And I know that's much more fluid now than it was before, because there's people saying, you know, that for them, that doesn't suit who they are. And that's really interesting too. You know, people going, don't box me into something that's so narrow in a way. So I think that in all my years of working with women, and I've worked in over 60 countries around the world for 3 decades, and really about coming from a deep understanding of who we are as an unlimited, infinite, spiritual being, first and foremost. And then, okay, we're also women, but that's the second filter. And it's a place we show up to be able to bring our gifts to the world, but it's not our number one identity. And so as this is the last 30, 40 years, watching how women are becoming very empowered, are becoming very much more leaderful, very much more capable at handling naturally a sort of an economy that we're in at the moment, an environment globally that we're in at the moment, just by our conditioning as women, the sort of flexibility, communication, connection, holding spaces, that has put really an incredible shift in our human system, the way we are, the way we work, the way we live, relate. And there's this massive move in the dynamics of a system. And women we've been, you know, in this sort of way of supporting each other in those changes for a very long time. Not within the old competitive world of hierarchy and patriarchy within organizations. That competition was a bit mean for a long time, but that's even shifting. But there are a lot of men supporting women now too in policy and etc. But my question was, the last 5 or 6 years going, there's got to be a fallout here. There's got to be an impact on my brothers, you know? And I was imagining that that was the case, because you can't move a system without it impacting all parts of the system. It's just how it is. Family dynamics tell you that. So I started interviewing men and asking men from all different walks of life. I was in Chile at the beginning, but I was calling people around the world going, what's happening? And there are a number of men who were intending and attempting to move from the old model because it was not life-giving. They were kind of committed to a very narrow way of existence for the rest of their lives, and it wasn't what that brought them joy. But the systems around them were keeping them stuck and judging them. And so it was a very interesting exploration of mine, and it's still fascinating for me because I think often we look at things like domestic violence and femicide, which is extraordinary to me. It still happens in these days to such an extent, but we're not looking at the cause. What is it? It's not that men are born violent. You look at a baby boy, it's not a violent creature. So what happens in a system, and we don't look at the system well enough and go, what's going on? So we've got with us today Martin, and we're going to go on a conversation as we normally do, a meandering journey. And everyone who's here, I know that there are some friends who are here today who are also in a transition, certainly some women friends, but some male friends who are transitioning things that appear to be terrible that have happened. They've lost their jobs or, retrenched after a long period of time, or their business is full. And that impact is, I know some are really rethinking how they want to be, not just pick up and keep going again. Now, Martin has kind of been through and is in that very journey. So why don't you, Martin, wind us back a little bit to, your previous life. Tell us a little bit about the before, and then we'll get to the after.
Okay, so as you can all understand, I am born in Scotland, and we won't do the subtitles. I spent almost 30 years in Scotland, went to university. I was one of 5 kids, so I thought, normal childhood, etc. Then I decided I was working for an organisation, and I was doing a lot of work actually with National Australia Bank. And I thought, let's, opportunity to come out to Australia for 2 years. Let's see how it goes. I was a single guy at the time. I was transferred, came out to Sydney, and fell in love with the place. Absolutely adored it. One of the great things to connect me with more Australians and more people, I'm a runner, and I joined a running group, and I managed to do lots of races in different parts of the state and in Melbourne that I would never have found before. I even, I'll be a bit boastful here, I even raced in Boston twice, in the Boston Marathon. And at one point I was in the top 10 national marathon runners in Australia. And during my running career and running group, I actually met a girl, beautiful girl, ended up getting married in 2006, and then created a beautiful girl ourselves in 2007, and then another one in 2009, Eva and Amelia. And if we had a third, we'd probably have to use a different letter of the alphabet to call her name something. Then in 2010, the wheels started falling off. I was on that treadmill of life. I was 40, big mortgage, job title, thinking that I'd found my niche in the world. And then my mum died at the age of 68 in Scotland. And that was, doing the Mercy flight back to the UK was pretty tough. I went back there, and, I was Catholic, so it was a big Catholic funeral. And then the following year, and one of the things actually that I didn't do, I didn't seek help when my mum died to deal with my emotions. I threw myself into work thinking that work was the way forward, that if I put things in the back of my mind, they won't come forward. I'll just ignore them and just get on with living. In 2011, we found out that my parents were married 43 years, but my father actually had a mistress for 35, and I actually have another brother in Glasgow that I didn't know about. Then in 2012, in the April of 2012, my young sister lost her battle at the age of 37 to breast cancer. Then 6 weeks later, my father was outside his house on a wall, 6 foot, so what, 1.8 meters high, and he fell off the wall. And he was a very traditional man. He always wore shirts with pockets, and he had a pair of garden secateurs in his top pocket. As he fell, the secateurs pierced him in the heart, and he bled to death. 6 months after that, my marriage disintegrated. And then 6 weeks after that, on the 12th of November 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. Now, to put it into context, if we've got children, we generally check their glands, the swollen glands, the lymph nodes. If they're swollen, they've got a fever. I had lumps the size of golf balls in my neck, here, under my armpit, my groin, along my kidneys, and in my bone marrow. There is no stage, well, there is a stage 5 cancer, you're actually dead. But I had stage 4, and it's medically a non-curable cancer. So I underwent 8 rounds of chemotherapy and 2 years of drugs. And I'm glad to say I'm now 7.5 years cancer-free, and it's my belief, because I've changed my mental mindset, that this cancer will not come back. Medically, there is an 80% chance of it coming back, but I can control things in my mind to make it not come back. Then, obviously, over the last few years, I've been working in technology, I've been working as a sales leader, and I always had this calling that I had to do something better. Just over a year ago, I gave a presentation on the Are You OK Day in the organization I was with. And within 2 weeks, 36 people had come to me with, can I buy you a coffee? Can you help me here? Can you help me there? Ranging a whole array of things. And I thought to myself, this is something I need to do. So in August this year, I launched my company called GEM Wellness Warriors to focus on the well-being of men. And GEM standing for growth, empathy, and mindset. And one of the side things that I started doing was in the community, in my local community, getting men connected physically. So I rented out the local scout hall, which is a beautiful rustic scout hall, and started connecting men together. And over the last 8 weeks, I've had 30 men come to my circle. I run it on a Tuesday and Thursday. And every week I bring a different topic of conversation to start the conversation. And one of the empowering things is that when I say to them, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a relationship counselor, their bodies relax and they go, great, you're not going to program us into something that's not working for me. And from that, conversations will lead on. And I'll run it for about an hour and a half. And then I end the session with a few minutes of meditation. Now, taking men who have never meditated before is so powerful. But when you see their physical bodies and their whole emotion relax, calm down, it's incredible. And I've had to learn a lot of uncomfortable things as well. To share with you, I've had a couple of South African men come to the circle. And I was unaware that in South Africa, now these men are in their mid-50s, they learned how to hold a gun and shoot small animals, especially on farmlands. I've never held a gun before. So the connotations of holding a gun doesn't do anything for me, but for them, it's such joy for them to do it. So I found it quite uncomfortable. And some of the conversations that the men have now begun to start opening up. And I've had repeat men coming, which is fantastic. And we'll talk about emotions. I've brought subjects to the table such as intimacy. Gratitude was my topic last week. And automatically all the men went to a commercial frame of mind, gifts or receiving, but they were unaware about the gratitude for themselves, thanking themselves for one, coming and having the courage to come, but more importantly, for being good enough as the men that they are. So if we can, the men I'm focusing on that I have a connection with are really the men between the age of 30 and sort of 60, 65, who are still in the workplace, who are losing their voice and their presence because they don't really know who they are.
Wow, there's an awful lot in that, and I'd heard parts of your story before, Martin. Thank you for sharing it. And I mean, if we go back to the beginning part, and it was really like an avalanche of non-stop apparent tragedies, but in the end, what it's done is given you life, right? You've been given the gift, I would say, of being able to look at it in a different way, of being able to hear a call that this was actually giving you freedom to follow something that you were born to do, which gives you incredible life and gives life to others.
I couldn't agree more, and you know, it would be foolish for me not to pick up on the word freedom, especially from Braveheart and wearing a kilt on this beautiful day. Yes, it's given me joy, but it also, a bit like the conversation we had with our fellow brother, the artist, the magnetism it's given me as I walk down the street. I feel as if I'm floating. You know, I never thought of myself as a very attractive person, but people are coming up to me and I'm going, oh, this is great. I feel like my own dating agency.
But the thing is, we now know that so many, you know, there are statistics that talk about really the most attractive thing is a very natural inner confidence, which comes from feeling enough, having a sense of who you are, and not focused on you, on the fact that you can actually give, that you're giving to others. I'm loving. I just want to read what Bill from Indiana's written. He says, in our men's group here, we say 3 things. You are loved, you are enough as you are, and you're not alone. That's pretty powerful.
Look, it's one of the beautiful things that I did with the men was I got them to look, there's a mirror in the hall, and I got them to look in the mirror and tell me what they actually see. And it was really powerful. And, you know, there was a little bit of hesitancy at first, but when they actually started getting into it and saying, well, I'm good enough, I am enough, it was fantastic. And also going back to the fact that the men bring back gorgeous manners, if that makes sense. They say thank you. And the power of just saying thank you, especially just now, is incredible.
Yeah, wow. Martin, I want to pick up on this. I mean, this is a long conversation that we could do over a long period of time, and we will, I suspect. But something that comes to mind when you talked about intimacy, because I think that one of the things that I've noticed in working with women for many years is that we don't always do it, but in a kind of constructed environment, it's very easy to lead into intimacy, you know, which is a space of, I love this kind of breakdown of the word, which is intimacy, you know, intimacy. So you've got no barriers and no filters. You're just allowing yourself to be seen, which is not something that is normal in our world at all, you know. So But it's not a difficult thing when I bring women together to be able to create that. I think that women also, often through motherhood, are able to experience that kind of real intimacy, closeness that's at a deep energetic level, you know. And I think that the history of our industrialized, warring, kind of patriarchal world has not given space very much for the gift of intimacy to the male of our species. It's been more about kind of building, constructing, and being separate. I love what Bill said, you're not alone. I wrote in the email, this friend of mine in a conversation said, Carolyn, you don't understand, we're like lonely lions. So we roar and we go out there and we're individual, but we're alone, you know. So talk to me a little bit about your journey of intimacy, if you will.
Sure. So one of the many lessons that I've learned over the years is not only the relationships with myself. I've been brave enough and courageous enough to go and seek help when I needed it. And, you know, over the years, I've seen many psychologists, and even this week, the intimacy for myself, I actually reached out to some people and asked for help. And that really, you know, it was something I mentioned when I became ill 8-10 years ago, on that treadmill of life. You think you know all the answers, but being intimate and being grown up enough to actually go, you're not alone. It's the right thing to do to get help if need be. And that's going to make you a stronger person. You're not an island. You know, what is it they say? It takes a village to bring up kids. It also takes a village to bring up men and women. But if I can also take on a little bit about it, on the subject of intimacy, one of the men, and I just want to share with the audience today, one of the men became a father for the first time about a year ago, and he brought his son home, and he found that he could not connect with his son because of the two male egos and the energy of two males in the one house. He found it very difficult to connect, and he felt like he had no one to talk to. But my personal journey with intimacy, I feel that I've grown and have become more awake in myself. And, you know, as I approach my milestone birthday in 4 weeks today, actually, I'm probably the happiest I've been in my life. You know, I know where my boundaries are. I make more mistakes every day, which is great, but I'm always curious and learning and connecting with new people and having fun and being thankful for whom I am. I don't want to be anybody else.
Wow, that's pretty darn good, because there's something that you said earlier in your kind of first intro, but I think it's endemic in our world. We live in an achievement model of a world that says we have to be better, that who we are is not enough, that and it doesn't mean we can't kind of learn things and get better at things, but this idea that who we are intrinsically is not good enough and it has to improve in order to be acceptable or to be valuable or to be valid. This underpinning message that sits in our world is so fundamentally damaging. And if you're now saying, no, I can be inspired by other people for sure. I can be motivated, but you know, I love being who I am. Imagine the world if everyone was able to wake up going, feeling good in their own skin and just loving being who they are. No jealousy, no competition, happy for others to go ahead, and be able to sit with someone when they're, you know, not so easy. in life at the moment, when and able to be vulnerable. You know, it would be a very different world.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as I've been very open, I've got 2 teenage daughters, and I keep saying to them, I get better looking every day. I can't wait to wake up tomorrow. And they do that, the rolling of the teenage eyes going, oh yeah, whatever, Dad, whatever. But I think the most important thing is having love with yourself, but having humor as well. You've got to be able to have laughter. If you're not laughing and having belly laughs every day, and even, you know, to share with you, I went to yoga the other night, and beautiful yoga teacher. There was about a dozen of us in the class, myself and 2 other men, and the rest were all women. And she said, does anyone have any injuries or any medical ailments I need to know about so I can modify? And I stupidly said, yeah, I think I'm 10 weeks pregnant. Right. And she just, the whole class just got on board with it, taking, you know, making jokes about it, making sure that I didn't push myself too much. And it was just so much fun.
Wonderful. Bill is saying, can you share a little bit more about the 4 chambers that you talked about?
Yeah, sure. So the chambers which I go by are when you're holding your heart, and it's sort of, I got inspiration from this actually because my mum died of heart disease, and you've got to protect the 4 chambers. And if you're looking at the chambers, flow the blood throughout your body, and if you activate them every day, you're activating and you're giving yourself permission to give yourself a hug, and a hug of love, of light, of laughter, and connecting. And if you can do all 4 of them, that's not a bad day that you've had.
So how do you do that?
So taking your right hand, just putting it onto your own heart, physically. Yeah.
Thing you do.
Yeah. Physically do this in the morning when I wake up, and give myself, you know, if you can't be man enough to hug yourself, and even a woman, I'm not being sexist here, but give yourself a hug. Give yourself a hug before give anybody else a hug.
Okay, so go ahead. How are we doing it?
Yeah, so actually what I'll do, because I know that I know the path that you're going to take us down here. Let's take this as a path of taking a few minutes of meditation, and we can do it with our eyes closed, or we can do it with our eyes open. So if you are, let's take the, close our eyes and sit comfortably, and sit in the most comfortable position that you feel that you're in.
Okay.
If you're closing your eyes, take your imagination that you're at the beach, and the ocean of Mother Earth is just trickling over your toes, over your feet, over your ankles, cooling your body down, while Father Sky is giving you a blessing for the day. If you slowly breathe and exhale the breath that no longer serves you, that is no longer serving your body any purpose. As we do that, and you have your hand on your heart, I'm going to read a little poem about love by Derek Walcott. Love after love, the time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you. All your life, whom you ignored, for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Slowly give your heart a hug. Activate your 4 chambers. Give yourself a permission to activate that vitamin S of smile. And when we, in the next few minutes, open your eyes and come back into the room.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. We have to share that poem, I think.
Sure.
Did you write that or did you find it?
No, I actually have a book called Poems That Make Grown Men Cry.
Right.
And I've been using that in my circle periodically, just coming in, coming out. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't, because it will depend on the energy of the circle, whether or not I can take men this far.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. So what do you think is a path forward? There's two questions in my mind. What's the biggest impediment, do you think, to this freedom of living a life that you love living? That genuinely you wake up, you love being who you are, there's happiness in your heart, you can ask for help when you need it, there's a physicality and a vitality and an intimacy and joy. What's the biggest impediment, do you feel, for human beings, because I don't think it's just men, but we can talk about just men if you like, to being able to wake up like that, to engage in life and live it that way?
So I think one of the good and bad things about modern life is this, the telephone, the mobile device. We're fascinated with it. Give yourself the day of no technology would be a step forward. The other way is, instead of spending so much time on social networks, what about socializing with yourself? If you look at the amount of Facebook, Instagram, all the social media outlets that we have, we become hooked onto them. Stop it just for one day and give yourself 10 minutes, and you will find yourself automatically changing. 10 minutes will become 15, will become 20, will become an hour. That is a simple little way of going forward. Also, I think we have to educate, we have to really look at the education system. We have to start educating from a younger age. Let me explain something that happened in Scotland in the early 2000s. The policymakers got together with the dental profession and started teaching young kids at the kindergarten age, so 4, 5, 6, all about oral care and not taking fizzy drinks. Within 5 years, it reduced the obesity rate by 60%, because the young kids were saying to their parents, don't take these fizzy drinks, they're bad for you. And if we look at today's society, I'm very proud, like most parents who will be on this call, I'm very proud of how my kids have shown me resilience in adapting to online learning, to being away from their peers. And I'm very proud of them. So I think the way forward is to have a curious mind. And also, more importantly, being able to say no to things is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a curious mind, being able to say no. I think you when you threw in education, the education system, I think that's a big conversation in another aspect. But I wonder, like we had Tyson, a few weeks ago, Tyson and Megan. And I know that within Indigenous communities out in the bush, that before the age of 5, a child is a child. It's not a boy or a girl. It's just a child. And it moves throughout the community, free to go into the women's business area, the men's business. It's just a child. It's part of the community. At the age of 5, depending on its gender, its sex, then it is kind of started to channel into the tasks associated with and the wisdom associated with men's business, women's business, the tasks. And I think there's something really interesting in that allows a child to absorb the energies of the whole community as the foundation of who they are in the beginning years of their life, so that they have access to both that feminine energy and the masculine energy. So let's just do a quick, very thumbnail sketch define of those two energies which exist in each human being. But the feminine being more the access to the invisible, the intangible, the inner world, the intimacy, the communications, the connections, that kind of world of seeing patterns. And then the masculine of being able to deliver, being able to kind of build and construct and form in the outer world and see something right through to the end, you know, pull it through. So these two energies belong to all human beings, right? They're absolutely. But if we're acculturated into being only male and only female with only those energies, then we don't grow up as a whole human being. So I love this idea of a child being able to move across those energies and feel them in themselves as something very natural in their whole being before they then take it into their gender-specific life. So I think my dad, I just got a call, came through from my dad, I bumped him. But my dad said something to me once which I found fascinating, that, you know, he doesn't go to church anymore, hasn't gone to church for a long time, but he meditates each day and he's got his meetings and so on. But one of the things that he said to me once, that when he goes to mass or to a spiritual environment, he has a much more powerful experience if he goes with a woman than if he goes alone. And I asked him, what do you think that is? And he said, I think what it is I'm able to access the feminine, the sort of spirituality, the inner world, if I'm with a woman who's able to hold that kind of entry space for me, the energy. And he'd heard that from a priest, a Franciscan priest in New Mexico, Father Richard Raw. So what do you think are some of the ways that you have been working with and that other men can work with to access this other part that has not been necessarily allowed to live easily and fully?
Well, I think there's a combination of things there, Caroline. When you become a parent, for example, there are many, many women's groups that connect regularly. There are no men's groups to connect, to talk about how they feel and what support there are for them. So I think there should be an incentive, a government incentive, to try and connect these men together, because mentally, their mental health is changing between being a parent, being a husband and then becoming a parent. And there are thousands of books, but there's no connection that men can go and connect with each other and talk about that and how they're feeling. And it could be despair, which is normal. It could be a lack of sleep. One of the men that is in my circle is a young man, sort of late 30s. I can't turn around to him and he's very anxious. He's got a 3-year-old and a newborn. So he's got the puffy eyes, you know, he sometimes looks exhausted. there's no way I'm going to say to him, get 8 hours sleep a night, you'll feel fantastic, your wife will love you. Slow down, and he can meditate for 4 or 5 minutes a day, and he can calm himself down. The other key thing, I think that there's got to be a real education, community education that has to start. School is a perfect way of connecting people, but school should be encouraged to bring your dad to school day. Because it's very sexist that the mother generally does the school drop-offs and the collections, but getting the dads to come along and do that is a way forward for connecting them. It is true that we need to educate our young, but that is where I'm feeling very passionate about this age 30 to 60, 65. We can make a change. We have to make a change in order to help our young. We have to work together, because if we're trying to do it in isolation, it won't work. It's got to be a continuation of education, connecting. Be prepared to also, as a society, be prepared to know that we will get things wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a big mindset of change, especially of being a man, if that makes sense. We don't like admitting when we've done things wrong, or we have to go and buy flowers, or we have to buy chocolates, or do the usual things.
Okay, I want to jump in here, Martin, because before we get to our 10:30 mark, which is in 10 minutes, the work of Brené Brown, which is her research into shame and vulnerability, and it's big research, and of course, what we know, nobody likes to feel shame. Nobody really loves to feel vulnerable. It's not an easy feeling to kind of feel that, but specifically her research shows that, particularly for men, that vulnerability equals weakness, and the worst thing that a man can do in our patriarchal culture is to show weakness. So if one, in order to connect, which she says we're hardwired for connection and belonging, and in order to connect, what we need to do is be vulnerable, and yet vulnerability means weakness, and weakness is not acceptable. There's a big journey in there to unpack and reframe, redefine, and show up being more and more vulnerable and more successful in that as a way. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
Look, I couldn't agree more, because again, one of the continuous conversations I'm having with the men who are still working, and a lot of them work for multinational organizations. As you can see behind me, you can see photographs, you can see a little bit. I'm bringing you into my home, right? In a work environment, a lot of corporates are still having that mask behind them and not displaying any vulnerability. Because a lot of, dare I say, middle management and some of the leaders just now, they were trained, don't show vulnerability. It's all about the dollar. If you take people in the medical profession, they're very, very good at writing a prescription. To become a doctor in Australia, you do 6 years of study and you do 12 hours of nutrition. So there's got to be a lot of education. When we're talking about, the medical profession, that is quite egotistical. We put them on a pedestal at times, thinking that they have all the answers. They are struggling at the moment because, they don't know the answers, but they won't admit it. So you talk about vulnerability. It's also got to be that person has got to be curious in nature and open to learning.
Okay, but if they're not, okay, so we've got a culture has bred the imposter syndrome, where everybody is pretending they know what to do, that it's impossible to know what to do, right? Especially if we're not if you're not connected to beyond your head, you're connected to your intuition, which speaks to you of things you can't see or plan or control. And your intuition or your gut or whatever will give you the clarity of what to do. But if you're disconnected from your feelings, from your emotions, from the more subtle things of the unseen world, because it's weakness or it's not controllable or it doesn't exist, then you can't possibly know what to do or where to go. And if you're expecting that you do know what to do and where to go, and others, you think others are depending on you too, the pressure on that is an enormous pressure, Martin. We're living like there's a massive pressure cooker going on here.
It hugely is. And when I come across people and they say, oh, I'm too embarrassed, or I don't want to admit that I'm struggling, take a step back and look at professional sport athletes at the moment. They have a team of people around them, which will also mean a coach for performance, for physical performance, but they also have, most of them will have a psychologist or somebody that can get into the brain. Now, if we look at, one of the things that we sometimes forget, what did that 12-year-old boy or girl want to be when they were free and didn't have the wiring that we have now? We knew instinctively we could go on our bike, we didn't have a watch on, and we would come back for dinner. And we would also, my little pet hate at the moment, we would also call our friends' parents by Mr. or Mrs. We wouldn't call them Victor or Caroline. It was that respect, and that's changed hugely. I get confused when my kids start talking about, such and such, and going, that's someone's mum. But the most important is bringing it down to a language that people will resonate with.
Yeah, and I think as many commented in the chat, that your story is also inspiring. And I think that the more that we share stories of transformation, not to change other people, but platforms of that share from the heart, and also, the logic of it too. I think logic is really important in this, but from the heart, because I think that what we know about vulnerability, if I know the question that says, if you're vulnerable, what do you feel? What do you think? You think you're weak, okay. But if you see someone else being vulnerable, do you think they're weak? Mostly no, you think they're incredibly courageous. You go, oh my God, that's such courage for them to show up being honest, being authentic, being true, being vulnerable. So I think wherever possible to also, affirm when someone is being vulnerable, to affirm, wow, that's a lot of courage, because we value courage and brave heart and all of that, but we don't value this thing called vulnerability yet.
Look, I couldn't agree. And, to share with the 42 people on this call, I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning, pretty nervous about this morning. I've been thinking about this all week. And, I'm not exactly a quiet, shy, introvert type of person. So I know what things work for me. I went out for a run. I ran 7-8 kilometers this morning, and that worked for my nervous system, right? I get nervous every time I come on stage. I get nervous, sometimes when I go out at nighttime, because, what happens if somebody doesn't like what I'm wearing, or, makes a fool of it? And, to share, I joined a local soccer team, an old man soccer team in my local area. And we're all pretty rubbish, but we all have good fun, and it's a great way of connecting. And the coach, we had a end of season drinks a few weeks ago, And there were about 4 or 5 new bodies to the soccer team. And he's saying, oh, great, Alex is new, Tommy's new, but for God's sake, no more bloody Scotsmen, please. So you've got to have that community of laughter, of being able to be vulnerable to yourself, to put yourself out there. And, you know, you're not going to meet people sitting in your office. You're not going to connect. I would say that I probably connected with more people during COVID than I have done over the last 2 years. But genuine people that are wanting to connect with me. During the week, I was on a call with people in Newcastle in the UK, and it was wonderful. They actually understood what I was saying. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Look, Martin, the time has flown by, as it does. We're at 10:30 almost, but a minute. So we're going to start to open up in a moment. I want to say, I know that nervousness comes, and it's an old kind of leftover thing from our culture that says we have to perform and we've got to be a certain way. But I would just like to affirm and confirm and encourage you. You actually never would have to be nervous. You just show up who you are in your authenticity and your positive energy and your daily challenges as well. You never have to doubt yourself. Honestly, you're a gift. So I will leave you with that idea. And I also want to say that maybe we're going to bring everybody up. Wayne's putting some information up about next week, Thursday, which is the International Men's Day. I think you're going to be with Wayne for a little bit on that day. I think there's, you talk about having a laugh. I know a lot of Australian men who avert vulnerability by laughing, making jokes. So I think it's a balance as well between actually being able to be joyful and light, not taking everything too seriously, but not making fun of everything because you're uncomfortable when it gets to kind of touch something intimate or what's the other word I'm looking at? Something vulnerable, because Australian males joke their way out of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I've thoroughly enjoyed, and thank you for allowing me the ears of 40 other people on this call. It's been a hell of a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing. I feel wealthier in myself than I've never felt before.
That's it. I mean, if you were to go to, turn up the toes, go to the grave today, you'd be able to go feeling content that you'd given it your all.
Look, I went ocean swimming yesterday and didn't drown, so that was good.
I also went ocean swimming yesterday and didn't drown, so that's good because we kept going with this. Martin, thank you. Let's open up, and I know that there are, some of the comments that are here. Wayne, you might like to share, and Bill, you're also sharing from your explorations with your men's groups over there. Stephen, I know that you've been on a journey this year. Nosh, you always seem to be pretty, doing pretty good. Maybe we can hear from some of you. We'd love to hear from some of you about this and join in the conversation with Martin and myself. Who'd like to share? Just, pop your hand up so we can...
Hey, Caroline, do you mind if I go?
Okay, Nosh.
If that's all right. So I also wanted to go first because I actually want to drive out because it's a beautiful day in Melbourne. Yeah. But I could listen to Martin all day. Martin, thank you for your talk. So many things that you said have resonated. I always see, my mum said something to me once when we were little, when we used to cry, So she's like, smile and the world smiles with you and cry when you cry alone. And we were little kids, we were like 4 or 5. I've got an older sister who is 5 years older than me. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, vitamin S is really helpful. I think even if you can smile in situations where the whole world is falling into pieces for you, somehow you will find the courage and the energy to pick yourself up, gather all the pieces and stand up. And I think you've just reiterated that with a few other things in your session. So thank you, and keep doing the work that you are doing, because it helps a lot of people. Yeah. Thank you. That's me.
Terrific, Nosh. Thank you. Martin, you want
to? Thank you, Nosh. It's always a pleasure seeing your face when we do.
Or at least this part. Were you?
Hey, Caroline, I must admit, I've just got out of bed because I've been waking up way too early, and I'm like, oh, shucks, it's 9:35, and I'm like, no, 5 minutes late, I can't do that. So you're only going to see that much today, I'm afraid, Martin.
It's good to see that much. Thanks, Nosh. Bill, you've got your mic open.
Yes, I'm wearing my Victor Perton colors today. And thank you so much, Caroline, and Martin. You are wonderful. You're great, and your energy is infectious. Now, when you have a heart procedure in the hospital nearby, they give you a heart pillow. So you might want to get a heart pillow. This is with a picture of all your heart architecture on it. So you can hug the pillow, and it's actually what they do when you have an incision and that you're trying to knit that incision better. You hug your heart pillow. But all kidding aside, I find this whole male disempowerment thing, I love your remedies, talking about it, talking about who you are. What is your identity? What is your male identity? What is your family identity? Where is your family from? What's your family history? How are you connected to the world? And obviously this moves well across the power lines between the feminine and the masculine. How have you found the men react when you said you've had some successes and some failures? How do men react when you start to move into this subject of discussion where you're asking them to talk about their masculinity and the quirks that they may have or the things they're trying to overcome?
Look, it's during the sessions, I've tried things, and just the knowing what I can push and what I can't push and what I can facilitate, and making sure that everybody has the opportunity to have a voice. Bearing in mind, there is the traditional alpha male that generally comes to the sessions. So making sure that they can be heard, but they can also listen. And curiously enough as well, Bill, allowing some space just for some silence is really good for them to take it in.
And is it mainly discussion in a circle, or do you go on?
I should have sent the picture. It's old school. It's a scout hall with the benches, you know, the old benches that you sat on, even when you were at school, Bill. It's those, and it brings back, it's actually brought back a lot of memories for a lot of the guys when they were, 10, 12, or even at junior school, to go, oh, I remember this, I remember that. And it's got that rusticness, and even so much so that the train line goes past, the train line is behind the scout hall, and the trains go past regularly. So that allows a little bit of silence to happen, because you can't hear when a bloody train goes past at zooming speed.
Well, the other thing, and just one more area I'd love to listen to you talk about. Have you done any, like, going out camping as a group or going out on an excursion as a group where it's not centered around that
So,
specifically where you're not centered around alcohol, but you're centered around maybe preparing food for each other.
look, that's one of the things that certainly we'll be doing over here in Australia. A lot of the men are now having to take an extra week off work. So we can't really go anywhere. So it is certainly something I'd be very keen to do, that we go. There's some glorious bush trails here, treks, go out. But I take your point as well. Without alcohol is essential to really open people up. And my next goal is actually to do a men's circle. I'm doing them at noon. I would like to do one at nighttime because the energy would be different and encouraging. And also that would encourage, and going back to the point we spoke about earlier, it will encourage the kids to say to their fathers, because they'll know about it, Dad, you need to go to this.
Good idea. Great idea.
Bill,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Bill.
Bill, Gareth Andrews, who's not on the call today, but he's an ex-footballer out of Melbourne, in his 70s, I think now, or just turned 70, and he works with men as well for the last number of years. And one of the things he does is it's one of the most important things for him is to take men out, to sit out in the outback and go with the Aboriginal men, so that they learn how to be in that space in it's a completely different way of being than the sort of cultural norms. So
yeah, that's a wonderful thing to do. It's orthogonal, but there's another similar thing, which is our men's group at church. We take a group and we go to a prison nearby, and we do visiting hours with the prisoners. And I'm not talking about anybody dangerous really, but people that are in there typically for drug charges and things like that. And they're struggling with addictions in their lives. But that's been extremely centering. You know, it humbles everybody so much to try and empathize and deal with the problems that a prisoner is having and their view of the world. That's another thing. But the thing I want to go back to though is the preparing meals for each other. And whether you do what we call it a potluck or a pitch-in, where you go to one person's house, but each person brings a dish with them, where you've all cooked something and you bring it together and you eat together. That can be a good way to build confidence.
There is a movement here for men, actually. I'm trying to remember the name of it off the top of my head, and it's similar to that. The culture here in Australia is very much having a barbecue, and they'll do that on a monthly basis. And the name, once I remember the name of it, I'll remember it. And that's exactly for that, to get people around a barbecue. The only thing that I have with that is that it connects men, but I'm wanting to go even further and actually get them to talk. Most Aussie men are all experts in cooking barbecues, so the alpha male comes out quite a bit.
Yeah, I can see how it would. Well, these are, you're doing wonderful things. It's very stimulating to hear and you got some wonderful ideas. Thanks so much.
Oh, I can only go learning from others, and especially in circles like this, which is fantastic.
Yeah, Dave, go for it.
Hey, Carolyn. Thanks, Martin. I was interested when the discussion, Carolyn, you started talking about vulnerability and weakness and hurt. We didn't actually use the word hurt, but in the sense of men loving themselves and accepting themselves, I think there's a constant battle going on when the hurts get really big, Martin, and how we get through those and how we're resilient. And I think we can draw on our love for ourselves, but for some men that's difficult if they've not got much fuel there in that love area. So they need the help of others. And so it's always this combination of others, yourself, or some greater sense of spirituality about your life. So it's complex, isn't it? But I just thought there was that word there of men dealing with the complexities of feeling not good enough and hurt. And they don't do it all the time. Sometimes they feel great, but it's when it really gets tough and they can't deal with those emotions, that they start behaving really as they maybe wouldn't want to?
Look, thanks for that, David. During some of my dark days, 2012, 2013, 2014, where my brain, I had to walk around with a notepad most of the time and write things down. I couldn't remember things. I was getting a lot of psychological help, but to be honest, it was going in one ear and out the other at times. But that held a safe space for me, and I was having some challenges, and I went to see one psychologist whom she opened up and said, and spoke about her vulnerability. So it helped me, rather than being a program psychologist. And, you know, you come in, and for those who have never been to a psychologist, you generally come in for about an hour, chat for about 40 minutes, then the psychologist is looking over your shoulder at the clock that's programmed to say, bugger off, and we'll see you in 6 weeks. $200 later, thanks very much. There's so much more, and as I've been working with a friend of mine who's on the call here, a new lady on the call here, Natalie, and we were talking about food, and Hippocrates has said, let food be thy medicine. So that's things that we can do in our own control. And I've learned so much about nutritional medicine over the last few years. It's sort of reignited a passion. Believe it or not, my first degree is in hotel management. I loved, for those who are not familiar with the program, Fawlty Towers and Basil Fawlty, and that kind of wacky sense of humor. I loved that. And I remember being a child and always wanting to know, when you go to hotels and it says private or, you know, staff only, how does all that work? But I was really interested. I studied in the coldest place in Scotland called Aberdeen. And it's that cold that the polar bears come in winter because it's too bloody cold in the ocean. And I was really interested in, what food do you give people working out in the oil rigs in the middle of the North Sea, where you can't smoke and you can't drink? You've got to give people the right food to get that right productivity. But at that time in the late 80s, you either had to be a doctor or a scientist. And I keep saying about education, we've got to start educating these traditional professions that food is important. The whole healthcare has to be preventative health. And just, you know, one of the things that's come out on my circle, David, to share with you as well, I have some men who are really petrified. They're in their 50s and they're really petrified to go and get a prostate examination because of what their brain is saying that they have to go through, but they would accept a cancer outcome. So we have to, and you know, one thing that I have, I feel very lucky. If I was to say something, I hope I'm not being offensive here, I was dead before cancer gave me my life. And every 3 months, I have to go the highs and lows and be checked out and get blood tests. But I have a strong relationship with my hematologist, and it's that relationship that helps me as well. And you've got to have a circle of angels that you can offload as either a man or a woman to be able to go, I'm having a bad day. They won't judge you, but it is okay to have a bad day as well.
Thanks, Martin.
That's very beautiful, Martin. I love that circle of angels, and it's okay to have a bad day and not a good day and be accepted and not judged. Really powerful stuff. Thanks, Martin.
No problem.
Thanks, David. You know, David, that bringing in that word of hurt, I think, is really an important one, because I think that none of us are educated, we can go back to education again, to deal with hurt from a very young age. So things that really you think shouldn't, they're pathetic, they shouldn't hurt us, but they do. And we don't know what to do with them, so we bury them, and then it becomes a repressed sort of situation, and it comes out in ways that, like you say, exactly. We'd rather not be behaving that way, and we don't know why we are, because it's something that's buried. And with Angelica, who's over there in the corner, but she's from Chile, we've been running 1 week silent healing retreats for the past 15 years up in the Andes Mountains, and giving space and silence and listening, you know, listening being the most powerful thing that someone is, you know, can say that the ugliest thing they've ever done, the most shameful thing, and the world doesn't fall down and no one looks at that. Well, they only share with one person, but you know, the world goes on and they unload the shame, and no one looks at them like they're anything more than love, you know, or anything less than love. So I think that there are things that we need to definitely bring in, and the sort of work Martin's doing is just beautiful and joyful. It's, you know, that's what you have, Martin, that I love, is this deep commitment to transformation in a joyful way, and not in a light or superficial way. Very powerful experience.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. I think one of the another key learning is having the ability to learn how to breathe properly is so important. And again, you know, we go back to some of the basics about how can we bring our self-awareness and our own self-care, good sleep, good foods, and breathe properly.
Yeah, that might be a point in which to close. Take a nice deep breath. We might, let me see, is there anyone else who's wanting to share something? Or Wayne, Stephen, yeah, Stephen, please. Stephen, you're on mute. Yeah,
maybe while he's doing that, Natalie's got her hand up, Caroline.
Oh, okay, Natalie, go ahead. Yeah, also on mute. Yeah, go.
I was actually waving to Martin.
Well, welcome for joining us today, Natalie.
No, thank you. Yeah, like Martin and I just recently connected, so it's been amazing, and such passion and heart coming from everybody is just amazing. And you know, I guess one thing that I could just add is just for people to know that you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You're born, you know, with such beautiful power as being a human being, but you know, unfortunately we get programmed between our very early cognitive years, and we've got to kind of just find our own blueprint instead of the one that we've been laid down with. So yeah, great, beautiful energy group. It's, yeah, I'm really privileged. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, great.
So I think Stephen's now on unmute.
Thank you. Sorry. And thank you so much, Martin, for the conversation. I'll bring back, I was in your situation probably about 4 years ago where I had a serious illness. I was basically knocked on my butt, basically, and I could only, my masculinity was taken away. I could only raise my head for an hour a day, and I had to grow again. But my point to you was I lost all my senses. So we talk about our phone, and that takes away then it becomes our life, okay? And we watch the phone. You look at parents at parks looking at their phone, and it really isn't anything. You know, they're watching US elections. But what I learned was, and I'm trying to do now, reconnect of the feeling. So when I was in the park, I need to wear glasses. I didn't have my glasses on. I couldn't look at my phone. I couldn't put on shoes. So I had to feel. And my point is anchoring your day of feeling. So I had to feel the grass. I had to feel the sunshine. So I was, I suppose, renewing my body as well, of trying to anchor the day. So that's my point to you. Oh, and what do you think?
Oh, look, thank you for showing. Thank you, first of all, for showing up and contributing as well, Stephen. It's just so important to connect, and so also the feelings that you have are your feelings. They're no one else's feelings. It's your experience. And just going back to Mother Nature, I think, as I said, one of the boundaries that I try to impose is, you know, not having the technology for a day and just connecting, whether it be walking to the park to go and grab a coffee or just being able to get outside and breathe, take in the fresh air, be thankful for the ability to breathe, to drink water, to have a roof over your head. And you don't have to have all the bells and whistles, if that makes sense. You're good enough of the person that you are.
Yeah, but when you go down to the beach, you visualize the beach, but do you smell the air? Do you smell the sea? Sorry, I take it all the senses to invigorate your day. And
look, it's incredible when you go to the ocean and you throw yourself in and how good you feel.
Mm.
You know, and looking at what your background is there, you know, look how beautiful it is outside in fresh air. You don't need a lot of the materialistic things to try and fit in. You are good enough as a person that you are.
Yeah, but my point to me is anchoring your day. How do you start your day for a positive outlook is appreciating gratitude. So, you know, like meditation, gratitude, starting off the day, you've got so much noise going on and life is busy. But if you anchor your day to a point, then we move on from that day and we can confront, but we're good in ourselves for that day.
Stephen, one of the things, I've just been rereading Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positivity. And it's interesting because his is rooted in religious faith, and he talks about prayer first thing. But the Seligman science around gratitude journals is that they're pretty useless if you just write into them at the end of the day. If that's all you do, it's good, it's good, but the science says that you read it first thing in the morning. Whether you're sitting on the toilet or having a coffee, to reread the gratitude for yesterday is the power. And I've been reading some stuff. Australia now is the most over-medicated country in the world on anxiety and depression. And the reality is that 90% of those drugs don't work on people with mild to moderate depression. So we've got people popping pills for depression, anxiety. The science says that the gratitude journal reread in the morning is the thing. So it's that grounding. So instead of the phone going off, instead of a clock alarm with the radio going off, you know, whether you wake up naturally or you wake up with an alarm clock, the best discipline, you know, obviously religious people would say a prayer. You know, the positive psychology people would say reread the gratitude of yesterday. And then as you say, my mum, you know, who died recently, she would walk in the grass in the morning in her garden, exactly as you do, that grounding in bare feet. And as Martin says, breathing. So, you know, there's great power. Carolyn, I just think this has been the most wonderful event. You know, when I read your email midweek, I was already inspired. Just almost every sentence of this conversation has been inspiring. And I think you can feel the hunger, Caroline, for even more work around this, you know. So I congratulate you. I congratulate Martin. This has been absolutely wonderful. And thank you to everyone else who's joined us. So if everyone, can we do a big applause? And then we've still got time to talk. So Wayne's got his hand up and I think Topo's got his hand up. But if everyone's got to go, it's just been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say, you know, thank you to Martin, because Martin's been fundamental in this community here as well. So everyone else we've invited in and sharing. Ali's here from the very first go and been here every week, but I'd say, you know, also Martin, you know, you've been part of weaving this community, so it's great to have someone from within share their experience as well. So it's very beautiful.
Oh,
Caroline, just one thing, because Bill's been, you know, Bill's working with a men's group in America, and Martin's leading his men's group, and Wayne's going to do something with Martin this week. I actually, you know, John Hagel said when we're organising the Centre for Optimism, we've got to run it like an evangelical church, right? We've got to have groups that meet in between. So, you know, you think of the evangelical church, what Hagel says is, you know, get 3,000 people at Mass on a Sunday, but that's not their secret. The secret is the group of 10 to 15 who meet in someone's lounge room midweek. And I just wonder, Martin, Bill, Wayne, David, Graham, whether Topo, whether we want to think about having a working group that can split even into smaller sort of 10s or 15s that can enhance what you're doing and support it.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
Oh, in fact, Bill says groups of 8.
Yeah, eight's the magic number.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're 8 and then 150.
I'm in big time. I'm in.
Good, you're in too. Well done. So I'll start to make some notes on how that works, because we've got a group working on Optimism 2.0. You know, well, obviously our biggest group is the Optimist Heart, you know, led by the charismatic Caroline Ward. And then we've got, you know, Optimism 2.0. And then I think that there's obviously the need for a men's groupings.
So maybe, Victor, I've got a kind of summit that I've planned out earlier in the year, which is bringing in also people who are expert, you know, and speak beautifully about archetypes and stereotypes that we need to unpack as well. And Paul and Tammy, they were going to join me in terms of sport. I've got a guy from Switzerland who's done a whole lot of work in working with kids in sport, with sports people, to transform the way sport helps young men grow in a more holistic way. So there's a format and a summit to put together. It'd be great to speak with others and have, you know, a number of us working it up. That'd be great.
I think you've got volunteers here. How about Wayne? Wayne and Anne. Wayne, you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great work, Martin. I think, you know, what you're putting forward is absolutely fantastic. And the issue got raised about causality, which I think is a really important factor, because you can treat symptoms, but you really don't get to the cause. And we have a real cultural problem. When I was younger, I was taught by a Native American Indian. And when they tend to introduce themselves, they talk about where they're from and their tribe, first of all. And so one of the things with that is that they're never alone, and they never feel alone, because any problems they have is a tribal problem, not an individual problem. Where in the West, we have individual problems. And of course, they're warriors, if I use that term. Basically, one of the most important things that they can do, or they see as really important, is they can actually cry publicly and also laugh publicly. And one of the problems that we have, of course, is the Prussian education system, which was brought in the early Napoleon Wars, which teaches us to say yes and not disobey, and to be an individual and tasked to do jobs. So I think that's a major thing that needs to be addressed, because children are very vulnerable, particularly up to the age of 12, in programming. But just on the other area, for people that may not know, the International Men's Day is on November 19th. And the official driver of that is actually out of Australia for the world. So I've been working on that for around nearly 10 years. And so doing the branding and actually pushing it out across the world. We now have 80 countries participating. We also do International Boys' Day, globally, internationally. That's on May 16th. And also work with a group called The Long Ride Home, which is to do with special forces. But it deals with PTSD for military personnel, also with first responders who get overlooked a lot of the time, have high levels of PTSD. But those areas that we work in also go across to the public as well. And we're lucky enough to have a patron. I sort of lead that group, a patron, which is Michael Jeffries, who was the former Governor General of Australia and head of Australian Special Forces.
Is there more information available on the November 19th Men's Day?
Yes, certainly. I actually posted, we're actually pushing into the States as well on our Facebook campaign that I'm running. I'll just repost it again, that information. So that's up now on the chat line.
Thank you.
And so basically the theme this year has been better health for men and boys. So Martin's topic and the topic today with Caroline is at the center of that sort of thing.
Thank you very much. And congratulations. Just so important, such beautiful work. Thank you.
Wayne, we're very happy to support you. So make sure you send me the link so that I can support your work on that.
Okay, great.
And then I think Anne's probably, I think, Carol, we've reached 11. So why don't we just let Anne, Anne, why don't you finish off with your comment and you can do the, as they do on Hard Quiz on ABC, you can send us off for the day.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, what I wanted to touch on is that it's been fascinating, and thank you, Martin, for getting in touch with the vulnerability and hurt. And thank you, David. David might be there anymore, David Williamson. But I think I've been having the experience of popping up. I've had a relative ring me about her son being in psychosis and posting things inappropriately on his work site, on communities of interest he's involved in. So I had this kind of a bit of epiphany, I guess, this morning during this session that, and you saying, Victor, about 90%, you know, we are so over-medicated. I'm a psychologist by training, but I'm not working as one. That, you know, and so much of the medication isn't working about anxiety and depression. And it is about enabling people to express their vulnerability and that hurt in a safe way. And often that is, like someone else said, about us having to express our own vulnerabilities to provide that safe space, not looking like the expert, not look like I've got all my world under control. And there's been a lot about men's health and about the men's groups, and that's fantastic. And I think that's profound and that needs to happen. But there's also women that are mothers of boys like me, aunt of several nephews, quite a few boys' tribes run in our family now, even though I was one of two girls and no boys. And I just think let's get into that. The mental health stuff, I think, is so important. And what we can do, except people get very frightened when people are psychotic or vulnerable and just want to damp them down, want to medicate them. That's not going to help ultimately. So I'd really like to engage somewhere in that space into the future. That would be great for me. But, okay, to get back to the hard quiz moment, look, the sun always rises. Isn't it just amazing? The sun always rises. Tomorrow is another day, and you never know what's going to unfold. Don't overplan it. I have learnt to go with the flow and let things find their flow. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Caroline, Victor, and Martin, especially for today.
So Caroline and Martin, send us off with a blessing each.
Go, Martin.
Ladies first.
Guests first.
Touche.
Like, thank you for allowing me into everybody's office space this morning or whatever time. Thank you for letting me share my story. It's been fantastic to connect with everybody, and what a beautiful way of starting my day here in Sydney. And thanks for all your energy and love.
I don't have much to add to that. I think it's a beautiful way to finish, Martin. Thank you, everyone, very much for being here. And Martin, thank you for your big-hearted generosity and wisdom. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Victor. As always.
Thank you.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode of The Optimist Heart as much as we did. So please get involved with the Centre for Optimism and sign up to our events and read our material and share what makes you optimistic. Our website is centreforoptimism.com with centre spelled C-E-N-T-R-E, and we'd love you to get involved. Have a great day.